We have just witnessed a terrible tragedy. Our siege of the mighty Wrathgate has been broken, not by the Scourge, but by the vile Forsaken. Our brothers, Alliance and Horde alike, were blindsided by the traitorous rats, their catapults perched in secret on the northern ridge above, dropping barrels of plague down upon us. A most unnatural concoction. It appears to be fatal to both the living and the undead, and it gave even the false King Arthas cause to retreat back to his lair. But how can it be so? A blight that affects both the living and the dead? Have these twisted apothecaries devised something so powerful? If so, how? The answer must be found, for the fate of all Azeroth may depend on it. The Battle of the Wrathgate is one of the most iconic moments in World of Warcraft, the first major cinematic shown in game, and one that had major ramifications for the free people of Azeroth and the rest of the war against the Lich King. But in the midst of all this action, I also find examining the build-up to this plot twist to be very interesting. It may surprise you to learn this betrayal, this new plague unleashed by the rogue Forsaken Undead, traces its roots all the way back to classic WoW, and that's where we'll be starting today. Who was responsible for the creation of this blight? And more importantly, how is it so terribly effective? I think the answers to these questions are hidden in the vanilla game world, and today, I'm here to present all the evidence of this plot and the secrets hidden within. This is the story of the new plague, along with my Bloodstone Theory, together forming one of the darkest conspiracies ever unraveled in World of Warcraft. I hope you're prepared, and I assure you the payoff is worth the detail. As always, thank you for the fun comments and support, and with all that being said, let's get right into it. Before we talk about anything related to Bloodstones, I want to begin by examining all of the clues and outright confirmations of research into the new plague that may or may not have contributed to the final devastating product. As anyone familiar with the Forsaken faction knows, the development and research relating to the Blight is not exactly some state secret, and is instead a widely shared goal or aspiration spoken about by many of the Forsaken, and even other races of the Horde. There is a lot to investigate, starting in the gloomy Tirisfal Glades. As newly awoken Forsaken emerge from the starting area of Deathnell, they are greeted by Deathguard Simmer, who encourages players to collect pumpkins from the nearby Saladin farmstead, still inhabited by farmers protected by the forces of the Scarlet Crusade. As you travel east to deliver the pumpkins, you might also find Gordo, a flesh abomination servant sent to collect gloomweed out here in the forest. Both of these quests end in Brill, a grim village on the outskirts of the capital, inhabited by the Forsaken and neighboring one of Tirisfal's many graveyards. Apothecary Johann gladly takes the stolen pumpkins, and gives you your first glimpse into the work the Royal Apothecary Society, or RAS, is doing here and abroad to further the goals of the Forsaken. Harmless pumpkins, or so it would seem. If we are to defeat Arthas's advances from the north, and the human infestation from the south, we need to start realizing the full potential of our gift of undeath. With a little ingenuity, a simple pumpkin becomes an agent for our Dark Lady. This pumpkin, laced with my latest formula, will prove to be quite a treat. Johann has you take the laced pumpkin to the basement of the nearby inn, where two prisoners can be found, a Scarlet Crusader and a Dwarven Mountaineer. Giving the so-called treat to the Crusader, they transform violently into an undead ghoul, wandering aimlessly and losing their mind before dying. It's twisted and cruel, and sets the precedent for what the Forsaken are willing to do to test new strains of plague. Junior Apothecary Holland, the one who sent Gordo into the woods, also has a bit of information to share with you once you collect a few samples of Doomweed, rather than the Gloomweed mistakenly brought to him earlier.
These will come in quite handy. You've done me, the lady, a fine service today. As promised, here is the reward that you deserve.
Something is off about this guy, and it doesn't help that he uses voice lines from the Warcraft 3 Necromancer unit instead of the normal Forsaken ones. This to me indicates he could belong to the splinter cell of the RAS that knows about the imminent betrayal catalyzed by the new plague down the road, or maybe he's just less devoted to the cause of serving the Banshee Queen than some of the other alchemists, working to further his own schemes under the guise of officially sanctioned research. It's also possible many of the apothecaries are in on the plot to destroy all except the Forsaken, and Holland just isn't as good at hiding it. Anyway, we never learn anything else about him, but this is something to keep in mind. The final major plague quest found here is given by Apothecary Johann, and consists of gathering several ingredients from the creatures of Tirisfal Glades. This questline is titled A New Plague, and Johann explains the Banshee Queen has given the RAS a new directive to develop a plague that will destroy the undead scourge commanded by the Lich King, though he does conveniently leave out the part about the blight potentially destroying the living as well. Interesting. Johann gives us a bit of insight into why each ingredient is collected, and I think the spider venom is the most intriguing. I uncovered some old text in one of my tomes that indicates that an ancient plague wiped out thousands of innocent victims. Later it was discovered that the deadly agent in the plague was preserved through the venom of nightweb spiders. Keep that historical element in mind for later. After collecting the necessary ingredients, the sample is dropped into a brew and is ready to be tested. And what more perfect candidate than the mountaineer in the basement, who drops dead immediately after consuming it. More efficient at killing, but no chance of resurrecting the victims into unwilling servants. We don't know Johann's thoughts on this experiment or the former, but as you conclude your business in the Tirisfal Glades, he asks you to deliver his sealed research papers to another contact who awaits your aid, Apothecary Renfarrell at the Sepulchre outpost in Silverpine Forest, who has his own leads to investigate regarding the formation of a new plague. You collect some samples from the local bear and spider populations, and it seems Renfarrell's research is higher up in the ranks as you're asked to deliver it straight to Master Apothecary Farinell in the Undercity. This is the dark heart of the Forsaken, located deep below the ruined capital city of Lordaeron. By either grim elevator or sewer pipe, you make your way into the city and find the alchemical district. Grotesque tables of experimentation dot the chamber, and vats of poison are barely contained as a group of prisoners are trapped in one corner, awaiting whatever batch of blight is to be tested next. It's a disturbing scene to any decent observer, but as Gollum once said in Lord of the Rings, we're not in decent places, and the crying captives in the corner seem perfectly in line with what we know about the apothecaries and their mission. It's a bit of environmental detail that confirms the Forsaken are planning to use this future new plague against the living as well as the Lich King's scourge forces. Master Farinell appreciates the reagents you've gathered and puts you to a more complicated task, recovering the journal of an alchemist cursed into a worgen in Pyrewood Village. This tome is incredibly important to the RAS, and reclaiming and reading it gives us a very compelling lead that the apothecaries will soon follow up on. There is a lot of info here, but it is extremely important. Through study of various fossilized creatures, I have deduced that in ancient times, a great plague swept through the waters of Lake Lordaeron. What caused this? We might never know, but the rate of contamination appears to be extremely high based on dense concentrations of remains distributed across the lake bed. In an attempt to uncover the past, I have begun to examine the creatures of the present in hopes of finding the missing clue to this mystery. The lake skulkers and lake creepers are ancient beasts who inhabit the islands in the center of Lake Lordaeron. There is a moss which grows on them that resembles trace materials on some of the fossils. More research needs to be done before I can speculate as to what this connection means. While trying to collect moss samples, I came across the scene of a bloody battle. The Vilefin tribe of Murlocs had come under siege by a marauding band of gnolls. There were both gnoll and Murloc corpses littering the battlefield. As I passed a mangled Murloc body, I noticed a strange hardened tumor protruding from the wound. As I began to study the tumor, it became clear it held similar properties to the moss I was collecting. Unfortunately, I could find no other tumors besides the one. Again, we see a mention of an ancient plague that occurred in the lands now known as Lordaeron, something the Forsaken want to recreate and weaponize in the present. The bog beasts that occupy the land still have trace materials linked to this extinction event, likely due to them being a reflection of the earth they inhabit, and even the occasional Murloc seems to suffer from the strange ailment linked to that original plague. Renfarrell at the Sepulchre wants to expand upon Berard's unfinished research, and you gather samples of the moss and track down an elusive tumor and bring the ingredients to the Undercity. where the quest line ends with Farinell congratulating you and telling you the research will be invaluable in developing the new plague. It should be noted that this recipe, these notes from Berard's journal, were confirmed in retail lore as being the canon solution for the new plague, but this is never confirmed in Classic, and I don't want to jump to conclusions too soon, especially when the upcoming theory adds on layers of subtle detail that I think are best left in a tone of ambiguity, not outright confirmation. As an aside, there are 2 other quests in this level range on Kalimdor that relate to the work of the apothecaries: gathering fungal spores that alter the life energy of organic beings, and collecting serpent bloom that is found deep within the Wailing Caverns. These quests are found at the Crossroads and Thunderbluff respectively, and while we never learn anything about how they may be used, these are important details that highlight how far-reaching the RAS has spread across Azeroth, likely as a consequence of the new Plague project. There is still much to be done to crack the secret of the dual-purpose blight, and players will soon venture south to the Hillsbrad foothills to take on a more active role in fighting against the living enemies of the Forsaken. The next step of your journey takes you to the town of Tarren Mill, where the Forsaken and their allies strike out against the human survivors in Hillsbrad. High Executor Darthalia is a major quest giver here, and she gives you one of the first mentions of the new plague in this zone. I am under direct command of Varimathras. We are to quell the human infestation until our apothecaries can develop the new plague. This is a contrast to what most other NPCs have told you up to this point. Many mentions of the Dark Lady, the Banshee Queen Sylvanas Windrunner, but this is one of the first mentions of Varimathras, demonic dreadlord, and right hand of the Queen in her dark court. We'll see more of him in the future, but for now, all we know is that he plays quite a role in the military decisions of the Forsaken, even telling you the following at the end of the Battle of Hillsbrad questline. You have quite a future in the Dark Lady's ranks if you continue to show such leadership and expertise in battle. While our primary threat is the Lich King's Scourge army descending from the north, the human problem continues to impede our battle plans. You, however, have shown that the humans can and will fall. This strongly parallels many of the apothecary quests you've already completed, with over half of them mentioning the dichotomy between Scourge and human threats against the Forsaken. While nothing is certain yet, this to me indicates he is on the same wavelength as the RAS, and probably also has a say in many of their research plans along with Sylvanas and the Master Apothecary. While questing in Hillsbrad, you'll also end up doing some errands for Apothecary Leiden, one of the most experienced chemists you've met up to this point, and one of the most cruel. He's indirectly working on the new plague for sure, but he seems more interested in the immediate development of pain and suffering through various elixirs you help him craft. Using various local ingredients from the wildlife nearby, you test one brew on a nearby frog, then a dog in the Hillsbrad fields who grows to monstrous size and attacks anybody nearby, and finally a group of innocent farmers held on the second floor of the inn. Did you know this was going on right above your Hearthstone location? These tests don't reveal any major discoveries related to the new plague, but they reinforce that idea of success at any cost, while maybe also savoring it along the way.
I think it's time we threw those farmers a party. Sounds like a grand old time. I swear if I have to stare at this deadly elixir without using it on someone for another day, I am going to scream.
Not all Forsaken are this passionate about their work, but Leiden in particular goes to show many of them, especially those on the Blight project, despise both the Scourge and the living, and are perfectly fine disposing of them to satisfy their own ends. If these quests and their scripted events weren't shown in cartoony 2004 graphics, I think the shock value would have been much greater, but even reflecting on the quest text and the visuals we do have makes it clear this is an endeavor of pure evil. On the Horde side, there isn't much else to be found up here in Lordaeron, but I do want to briefly mention the Forsaken presence on the other side of the ocean, in the Elven Forest of Ashenvale. The Horde has deployed squads of undead throughout the woods, and it seems their primary purpose is to spread disease and chaos throughout the Night Elven territory. Ruins are corrupted and sleeping druids are slain, their spirits severed from the mortal world while stealthed assassins prowl the woods, looting and poisoning. It's a dark, fitting element that adds depth to the PvP theme of this zone, and seeing the Forsaken in war mode with poisons at their disposal is such a devious new threat for the Alliance to deal with. There is a rare NPC, Apothecary Falthus, to be found in the north at Bothrend's Haunt, but Horde players never really interact with anyone belonging to the RAS here, and there's no mention of plague research going on. This operation seems much more militaristic and centered around helping the Horde win their offensive here, but it is still a really cool dynamic that we don't see in many other zones in Classic WoW. Back in Lordaeron, the Alliance gets their rebuttal to all this plague research a short while later, when players are questing in Hillsbrad and the Arathi Highlands during their 30s. The mage Finn O'Delic has arrived in Southshore with a rather interesting tale to tell.
My cousin in Hillsbrad recently put down his dog Stanley because the animal mystically grew to an immense size and savagely attacked anyone who came near him. I believe the undead are involved, and we're looking for signs to prove as much.
This is the first indication from a quest giver on the Alliance side that the new Plague project is being investigated, and you have to admire the two-sided storytelling here. Seeing the Elixir of Pain event from a different perspective is such an interesting angle. You are tasked with traveling to the Goshek farm and visiting Finn's companions Quay and Kinalori, who are searching for evidence of Forsaken experiments here. After eliminating the Forsaken courier and their crew, who are transporting intel from the farm back to Taran Mill, you and Kinalori raid the farm and take down Apothecary Jor-El, who is performing research in the small cabin. Judging from how the questline is titled Hints of a New Plague, I think it's pretty likely the alchemist was researching ingredients here in Arathi that could be used to make new poisons, but seeing as the Horde never interacts or completes any quests for him, we don't know the specifics. You bring the information back to Finn, who reassures you by saying the following: "With any luck, we'll figure out what the Forsaken are up to, and put an end to it." With what we know about the Wrathgate and the future of the Blight, it seems Finn and his crew weren't able to crack the code in time, or otherwise weren't able to stop the inevitable. Tragic, but not quite as tragic as the final clue I want to discuss before we dip into theory territory. A storyline that takes us far from Lordaeron and brings players to the very cusp of discovering the truth behind the new Plague conspiracy. As Horde players travel southward and explore more parts of the Eastern Kingdoms, they might pass by the town of Kargath and overhear a conversation between members of the expeditionary force stationed there. "So what's this new Plague all about?" "Well, from what I hear, the new Plague has all of the old Plague flavor, but none of the old Plague calories or carbohydrates."
"Well, hello there, ladies. Heard about the new Plague?"
Sure, the conversation is written to be humorous more than anything, but it supports the idea that the Horde in general is aware of the new Plague as a concept, a hypothetical saving grace that's just around the corner and will turn the tide against the scourge in the Plaguelands. But it seems that awareness does not extend to how the Blight is planned to destroy living beings as well. As you travel farther south, likely en route to the secluded outpost of Stonard in the Swamp of Sorrows, you'll pass by Beggar's Haunt on the border of Duskwood, where 2 Forsaken have been assigned.
"Our expeditionary force was sent at Varimathras' behest to survey Lower Azeroth. While out scouting, I noticed a human infiltrator spying on Beggar's Haunt. Before I could apprehend him, some of our Orcish brethren captured him and took him to Stonard, their stronghold in the Swamp of Sorrows. I want to help our Orcish allies. They did not see our camp here, but nonetheless I want to lend a hand. Work with Faustin here to develop a truth serum for our friend in Stonard."
I covered this short quest line for another purpose in my Mystery of the Deepstriders video, but it's now time to reveal its full implications for the new Plague conspiracy. It's obvious these two are no true supporters of the Horde, and are very likely sympathizers of the Forsaken rebels who would later orchestrate the Wrathgate incident. The apothecary stationed here needs Shadow Panther hearts and fungus from a Mire Lord in the Swamp of Sorrows, as well as a Deep Strider tumor from the ailing sea giants of Desolus. This quest is time-consuming and tricky, but completing it gets you access to the Grand Betrayal, the crown jewel of all the hints we've discussed so far. Apothecary Faustin makes his concoction, and after checking with his Deathstalker partner, the final plan is put into motion, slipping the serum into an ale that will then be given to the prisoner, a common pattern we've seen in other experiments earlier on in the leveling journey. Within Stonard, Infiltrator Markson eagerly accepts your gift, the first drink he's had in days in the humid swamp. Strangely, even before he's had the truth serum, he attempts to converse with you about what he's found.
Please have mercy on me. I have information that goes beyond Alliance boundaries. While I am no sympathizer of the Horde, there is political treachery going on that must be revealed. Let me drink this down, and then I'll tell you what I've learned. I believe the Forsaken are misleading the allies of the Horde. Wait, I feel so dizzy.
Markson, like the captured Scarlet Crusader from so long ago, shrivels into a shambling husk before collapsing to the ground, dead. If you check the forum comments from the days of Vanilla WoW, you'll see a bunch of disgruntled players talking about how the quest rewards aren't worth the effort of making the poison, but that wasn't really what this conclusion was all about. This is WoW's version of the inhibitor chip scene from Clone Wars, a scene that only makes perfect, terrible sense once you've witnessed the end goal, the plot twist, Order 66. This is the ultimate tragedy, to have one so close to revealing the treachery only to be killed off before the truth can be revealed. This storyline is called Nothing But the Truth, more like Anything But the Truth, the Forsaken extremists stifling any chance of the Horde discovering the plot. It's so bad it's good, and this final questline seals the deal more than anything else. The new plague will be created and sent to Northrend without anyone the wiser about its true purpose. Death to the Scourge, and death to the living. Originally, I wanted to make a video that ended here, recapping the entirety of the new plague clues in Classic WoW, and that's it. But I stumbled across a theory that fits with these pieces so well, and solves an element of this story that we've considered time and time again without answer. What is the secret behind the new plague, and what ingredient makes the new blight so lethal? We know the recipe has been perfected by the start of Wrath of the Lich King, and I believe there's something here in Classic, something overlooked, that unlocks the entire mystery. I'm not the first WoW channel to consider pieces of this theory, shout out to the retired YouTube channel Shinies and Lucky Doos, but I'd like to present what I believe to be the most complete version of it. Thanks for tuning in to all the details so far, and let's dive into Bloodstone Theory. At long last, the treachery is ended, the Undercity has been retaken, and the coup against the Horde has failed. Putris, the slimy wretch responsible for what transpired at the Wrathgate, is no more, and the Horde has disposed of the worm Varamothras, who sought to usurp the Banshee Queen and take control of the Forsaken to serve the Burning Legion. The War Chief has installed a regiment of guards to ensure the surviving apothecaries stay in line, and it is the hope of all who fought here, Alliance and Horde, that the new blight will never again be used to such terrible effect. With overwhelming research at our disposal, it won't be long until we discover the foul truth. As Horde adventurers are questing in Hillsbrad, they might lend a hand to the Magus Wardine Voidglare, who asks players to help him resolve a matter of utmost importance to the Forsaken. I came to Tarnmill to research, but now I must resolve a crisis. You see, 4 Forsaken fled the Undercity a few months ago. They turned their backs on their brethren, but what's worse, they stole from the Dark Lady. These thieves broke into a secure vault and stole 4 artifacts, items our apothecaries require in certain studies. Sylvanas would have these artifacts returned. The thieves fled the Undercity to Dalaran, and those wizards quarantined them in the Lordamir internment camp. This quest is perhaps the single most important one for this entire theory. Artifacts, needed by the Royal Apothecary Society for their research, have been stolen, and it's your job to track down the traitors and bring them back. To the west, you'll find the Lordamir internment camp, occupied by the wizards and battle mages of Dalaran, as well as the Forsaken who are under their protection, Richter, Dermot, Alina, and Keegan Darkmar, the leader of the company. As you eliminate the turncoat undead and their would-be protectors, you discover the artifacts are samples of something called Bloodstone, with each target dropping a different piece. Seems simple enough, right? You turn the quest items in, and the materials are returned to the Undercity for study. However, there is a 5th item you don't turn in, Bellamor's research journal, dropped by Warden Bellamor on the top floor of the internment camp. You aren't required to fight her for the quest, but she does stand between you and Keegan and both are usually eliminated by players serving the Dark Lady's wishes. The research journal is one of the longest readable books in the game, and I'll include a link to the full text in the description, but even just extracting a few pieces of it and sliding them into our theory unlocks a whole new dimension of the story here. These words came from Keegan's lips, and it is my hope that my colleagues will, upon reading this journal, know why I believe what he said. Remnants of the old gods still linger in the deep hollows of the world. New forces seek to harness that ancient power, and those who succeed will have a terrible weapon against their enemies. That is what Keegan uttered as he handed his Bloodstone pendant to me. None of my tests brought to light any revelations of the origin of Bloodstone. At the time, the only riddle I solved was that Bloodstone was neither living nor dead. The blood that had spilled near the Bloodstone pendant was slowly moving toward the piece of jewelry, as if gravity had somehow bent itself toward the Bloodstone. The blood that touched the pendant seemed to disappear, and the red color of the stone deepened as it drank more of my blood. Does Bloodstone drink blood? Does it crave blood? Does it attract blood? Or is Bloodstone made of blood? And if so, then whose? Mine? The blood of any human? Any animal? Or maybe Bloodstone is the blood of some unknown thing, the very thing that Keegan had both feared and revered when he handed me his pendant. That is the question that must be answered. It is the key. As somebody who loves lore and theorizing, this journal is a goldmine of evidence, and maybe you can already see where this is going. Bloodstone, this mysterious material, may be a remnant of an ancient old god in Lordaeron, very similar to how the blood of the old god Yogg-Saron in Northrend manifests as a cursed dark metal called Serenite. With the knowledge that Keegan stole the Bloodstone samples from the apothecaries, and a mention that a terrible weapon could be created from it, putting two and two together gives us the thesis of this theory. Bloodstone is the critical piece of the new plague, a material between life and death that absorbs the essence of life and seems to have a primordial will of its own. There's even more evidence in favor of this being the case. Returning to the geologic history from earlier in the video, an ancient plague swept across Lordaeron long ago, and bits and pieces of that plague, or some sign of it, have been deposited in lakebed fossils and the very land around Lordamere Lake, as evidenced by the corrupted moss present on the nature elementals and tumors on some of the murlocs. Could this have been some type of old god-related incident, perhaps where its blood was strewn across parts of Lordaeron only to be excavated or rediscovered millennia later? If Keegan's information is to be believed, then yes, Lordaeron has retained some dark element of the old gods from long ago, and anyone familiar with the Legion expansion knows this was later confirmed to be true by telling us how monstrous servants of the old gods fought and fell in this region. The Bloodstone, of course, remains a theory, but all of these clues are points on a line that supports the idea pretty well. Let's look at that quote again. New forces seek to harness that ancient power, and those who succeed will have a terrible weapon against their enemies. Seems like a pretty strong connection to the power of Bloodstones and the creation of the new plague, and there's something satisfying about the way the overarching research storyline would loop in an overlooked, seemingly irrelevant quest in such an integral role. The only zone we encounter Bloodstone in its raw form in Classic is the Arathi Highlands, another part of Lordaeron, and also another zone that features a Forsaken alchemist conducting research. How convenient. There is a cave here, Dry Whisker Gorge, where Bloodstone deposits can be mined as a favor for Krasik, who wishes to sell the ore for a high price to someone who, quote, has the knowledge to use it. The Syndicate criminals also wear amulets made of Bloodstone on occasion, and their warlock liaison to the demonic Argus Wake cult also wields a Bloodstone orb. These are collected and disposed of during a Horde questline, but who knows how that could have changed if it was a Forsaken alchemist investigating the gems. It should also be noted that, of all the zones in Lordaeron, Arathi is the one with the strongest ties to ancient elementals and the old gods, which are featured prominently during the Mizrael story. While it's possible Bloodstone is not unique to Arathi, it does seem to have a regional preference, solidifying in my mind that an old god and its servants once inhabited the lands that are now Lordaeron. Their crystallized blood, now the deposits of Bloodstone, now the only clues visible at the surface of their once great influence. The only other place we find a bloodstone is in an amulet belonging to Gakken the Darkbinder, a warlock in Stormwind. Young warlocks borrow the amulet to control a Voidwalker for the first time, indicating they do have some level of power over demonic forces despite being old god in nature, but other than that, we know very little. Still though, I think it's enough to prove a connection between bloodstones and the new plague. The slightest trace of old god magic returning to the world here to fuel a terrifying new blight. The answer was right there under our noses the whole time. We just had to connect the dots and read a book or two. Feel free to jump to the timestamp listed to skip this small semi-canon section, but there's one final piece to this theory that was added more recently, in Classic Season of Discovery. This tiny detail feels too intricate, too subtle for the devs to have put it there on purpose, but it's also too coincidental to be an accident. As a part of the prequel quest for the Scarlet Enclave raid, you come across a wrecked caravan that once belonged to the Scarlet Crusade. Inside are plagued flesh samples and a set of research notes that discuss how the Scarlet Crusade has created their own version of the plague. However, if you open the book and study it yourself, you'll find the text to be an exact copy of Bellamore's research journal from earlier, discussing the same findings about Bloodstone research we talked about too. Somehow, these pages talking about Bloodstones are mixed into a quest line directly involving a new plague. And the quest dialogue includes a lot of parallels too. I've been studying these research notes, and what I am seeing is terrifying. The Scarlet Crusade developed this plague. It is exactly as I expect. This plague has similar effects on both the living and the dead. This bodes ill for all, I am afraid. The question I have is, how were the Scarlet Crusaders able to develop such a plague? This would require a deep understanding of the original Plague of Undeath, and research into such plagues is challenging for the living. This is most troubling. It is later revealed that the Scarlet Crusade has, in this version of the game, kidnapped Grand Apothecary Putris from the Undercity, the one who would later go on to lead the betrayal at the Wrathgate. It becomes clear that the Scarlets were developing the new plague by using the talent of the rogue Putris, who maybe left the Undercity a bit more willingly than we were led to believe. Bloodstone research in tow, and ready to support a faction fully on board with his masterpiece. Maybe this is a complete accident or a mistake on Blizzard's part, but after putting this theory together for so long, it seemed incomplete for me to leave out at least the possibility of this theory being hinted at again, providing us with another point on the timeline between all the research being done and the destruction we witnessed at the Wrathgate. Certainly something to think about, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And so at last, we arrive at the end of this vast conspiracy. Twisted experimentation witnessed by Forsaken players from nearly their very first steps in Tirisfal Glades, alchemical anomalies dominating the focus of those loyal to the Banshee Queen, or those influencing her, and an obscure living stone with properties capable of shattering the balance of power on Azeroth. A truly complicated net of quests, items, and events, but I hope I was able to do it justice and present a cohesive story to you all today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I wish you all a happy new year and a great start to 2026. A special thank you to my channel members who provide bonus support for these videos, and until next time, may the Force be with you.